Should you save up for a Valve Index, or should you get a cheaper VR device instead? In this video, I will compare my Valve Index with a Lenovo Explorer, one of the cheapest VR setups you can get, to see the compromises you'd be making by getting one. The cheapest way to play VR is with a Windows mixed reality device, like the Lenovo Explorer. In America, before the Half-Life Alyx rush at least, these could be had new for about $250. In the UK, they're not so easy to come by, but I was able to pick one up secondhand on eBay for £205. That's less than 1/4 the price of the Valve Index. I'd say, compared with that, it's 90% of the immersion, 75% of the visual quality, 50% of the comfort, for 25% of the price. Of these things, I want to stress that the most important things to note here are the immersion and the price, because I've noticed this strange phenomenon with VR, more than in most things, where people think you need a premium device to make it worth having. It's odd. The average person wouldn't insist on a luxury car if they wanted to drive somewhere, nor would they insist on a 4K HDR display before they watched something. Ultimately, you'll be reaching the same destination or viewing the same content either way. And yet, when it comes to VR, for most people it's either the most expensive option or nothing at all. And because the most expensive option is so expensive, most end up settling for nothing at all instead. I guess people don't want their first VR experience ruined by an inadequate device. So I just want to clear this up. You will still get the VR experience with a Windows mixed reality device. It will let you play the same games. And you will still get to experience what makes VR special. WMR devices may be the minimum spec, but it's a well-designed minimum spec that will still get you what's important. So I just want to make that clear because I'll be spending the majority of this video explaining how it's not quite as good as the Valve Index, and that might make you think it's not worth having. Obviously, it's not going to be as good as the Valve Index, but what's important is there, and if it's a choice between nothing at all and this, yeah. If you have an acceptable gaming PC already, I can't think of many $250 PC upgrades that will open up as many new experiences as this one will. Let's start with Half-Life Alyx. Yes, this headset can still access Steam VR and anything for it. And my first reaction when I loaded up Half-Life Alyx was, it's Half-Life Alyx. Well, of course it is, it's not like it's going to be a different game, is it? But I guess I was expecting something to be missing, reserved for premium setups. But it's still VR. I looked around and it was authentically 3D and smooth. I looked at my hands and they moved okay. I could interact with items and shoot at things with about the same level of accuracy, minus the per finger tracking. You get the same experience, minus the solid premium feel of the Valve Index equipment. The graphics look similar, but less warm and with a slightly smaller field of view. The tracking, as far as I'm concerned, is the same. I had no problems with the Lenovo's more basic camera tracking, and if anything, its button-covered controllers were often easier to use than Valve's more natural, but less clicky Knuckles controllers. In almost every way, the experience with the Lenovo isn't quite as good as the Valve Index, but it's good enough that you can forget about the differences and actually get on with enjoying the game. The one exception being comfort. That's one area where I did find this Windows mixed reality device to be inferior. Let's talk details. Since I said that comfort is the one big difference, we might as well cover that first. The headset with the Lenovo is extremely light, which I would say is a good thing, but the foam padding for the nose is pathetic. It's all loose and does little to shield you from the headset's hard plastic. That plastic is nasty, managing to both crush my nose and dig into my face. I struggled to breathe through my nose with this thing on. I really don't know what they were thinking with the design here. The best solution will be some kind of homemade padding. If you're using this device regularly, you will end up having to do this. That plastic becomes unbearable. You have been warned. Get creative. But until then, I do have a sort of half solution. The trick is to pull the strap on the back further down your head and to tighten it, so the front of the headset rests more above your eyes. This makes it acceptably comfortable, though you're still missing out on the Valve Index's extra padding and stability. The next thing that's different is the cable. It's 4 meters long compared with the Valve Index's 6. This will be fine as long as it's plugged in at the edge of your play space. However, mine's plugged in around the back of my PC, which itself is quite a long way underneath my desk. I suspect most setups will be similar, and in a decently sized room, this will cause it to pull you back if you're stood in the far corners. I would have liked an extra meter for comfort, but it's workable if you don't mind turning your PC around so the connection is close to your play space. Where the cable meets the headset is horrible in its default position here. This will cause it to get caught on your ear. I don't know what they were thinking with this, but attaching the clip as far back around the head strap as I could solved this. You will do the same within minutes of setting the device up. And last are the controllers. I don't have anything against them, but like any controllers other than the Valve Index's knuckles, you have to be holding them at all times, which can tire your hands out faster than Valve's ones, which strap around your knuckles so you can let go of them whenever you want. Just something to be aware of. Right, that's comfort out of the way. Probably the thing you're worrying about most with buying a budget device is the visuals. And like I said at the start, it's 75% of the Valve Index. The biggest difference is to the colours. The Valve Index has a warmer image, while the Lenovo Explorer's is greener. When you're in VR, you have nothing to compare it to, so I didn't notice this until I quickly switched from it to the Valve Index. And that's when I noticed how green the Lenovo screen had been. The footage you can see here has been colour corrected to be like what I saw using the Lenovo, and if I disable this, it's like returning to the Valve Index again. It's like stepping out of the Matrix, isn't it? This difference is most noticeable in sunny outdoor places, which feel more neutral with the Lenovo rather than sunny. It's a shame, because it's not like this Lenovo can't pump out vivid reds. Valve's intro logo looks as red as ever. It's just that I couldn't figure out a way of configuring the colour balance while in VR. And I say that knowing that hundreds of you will suggest things that I've already tried, to which I'll say, no, that didn't work. And if it does, then good for you. But aside from its colour balance, visually, the Lenovo wasn't dramatically different to the Valve Index. Its refresh rate of 90 is fine. It's smooth, and I couldn't feel a significant difference between that and the Valve Index's 120 or 144. I did spot more motion blur when moving my head quickly. It's not distracting, it's just that I'm aware that with the Valve Index, the image remains as sharp in motion as when I'm stood still. I actually thought the Lenovo had a sharper image than the Valve Index did, despite having a slightly lower resolution. If you want to imagine the difference, if the Valve Index's image uses FXAA, then the Lenovo uses MSAA. And I think I've figured out why it looks clearer. The Lenovo has a smaller field of view, so what can be seen actually appears to have more detail than it would on the Valve Index. I really could notice this in the outdoor areas. So while they didn't look quite as sunny, any lines looked a bit more in focus, which was a welcome surprise from a budget device. That being said, the lines between the rows of pixels are more noticeable on the Lenovo. They're in staggered rows that you can make out against a white backdrop, or when navigating the game's bright yellow menus. It's not like it's visible enough to see lines across the display, but the image appears a bit grainier than with the Valve Index. I'm going to sound like a broken record by the end of this video, but again, it's not something that will ruin your immersion, but it's there if you're looking for it. Field of view. How far does the screen extend off in all directions? Further is better since it fills more of your peripheral vision and is thus more immersive. I didn't think to test this until the end, which I guess says that the Lenovo wasn't bad in this regard. It does have a better field of view than some of the other Windows Mixed Reality devices. It's apparently got a field of view of 110 degrees, while the Valve Index is adjustable with this dial on the side. At its furthest away, the Valve Index matched the Lenovo, then got better as I dialed it in closer. I came up with a test to describe this. With your eyes, make them look in the largest circle you can without straining them. The Lenovo screen stretches up as far as you can look, then not quite as far in the other directions, but close. At its best, the Valve Index matches my eyes vertically, in both directions, but stretches slightly beyond where I can look either side, which allowed the experience to surround me better. Remember, I'm describing where the image ends, but in your peripheral you'll see the void beyond. The last thing I checked was the dark areas. I couldn't make out details here quite as clearly with the Lenovo, which would fade out just a bit before the Index did, which I measured by counting planks leading off into the darkness. So a slight win to the Index here, though both headsets are known for having relatively poor black levels. Tracking's an interesting and important part of VR. Although you might think it does, your kit doesn't just magically know where everything is. It needs cameras or lasers of some kind to help it. The Valve Index is currently regarded as having the best VR tracking that you can have. It uses base stations dotted about your room to fire out infrared lasers everywhere. If set up properly, these will almost always be able to track the position of your head and hands. The Lenovo, on the other hand, uses cameras mounted to the headset itself. Some headsets, like the Rift, use a lot of cameras, but with just 2, the Lenovo has the bare minimum. The benefit of cameras is that it's a lot more practical and easier to set up, since you don't need base station setup around your room. It just remembers what your room looks like, and uses the bright lights on your controllers to track where they are. The downside is that if these cameras can't spot something, the tracking fails. So you'd expect it to stop tracking your hand if you put it behind your head, or if you game in complete darkness. And yet, the Lenovo's tracking was superb. In general gameplay it functioned perfectly well, and it was only when I started trying to break it that I discovered its limitations. The cameras track the position of your hands, but even when the cameras can't see the controllers, it seems like the controllers themselves continue to track the direction they're pointing in precisely. And to a limited extent, they still seemed capable of figuring out where they were. I was able to aim at and to kill a combined soldier when my gun was behind me. The only thing I couldn't do in this state was to throw objects, since I guess it needs to know the speed that your hands are moving at when letting go to simulate that successfully. But like I said, this is all when I'm trying to break it. When I was just playing the game normally, I had no problems at all throwing stuff and shooting. The general tracking wasn't shaky or jittery. I was in a well-lit room, which probably helped, but regardless, the cameras worked brilliantly. Putting my gun hand right into my face would lose the positional tracking, but as you can see, the directional tracking continued to function successfully. I might look stupid with a gun in my face, but I can still shoot like that if I choose to. And at one point during gameplay I started floating downwards into the floor when I was stood right at the edge of my playspace, staring straight into a mattress. This could probably be avoided by mapping the playspace out to be marginally smaller than the area in my room, to give the cameras more information to track my location from. Though saying that, the same applies to the Valve Index. There is no sound with this device, but there is a 3.5mm connection for you to plug some earbuds into. The Valve Index, in comparison, comes with speakers so good you wouldn't want anything else. So the sound quality with the Lenovo is ultimately determined by how good the earbuds you use are. It's hassle to have more cables dangling down, and I didn't find the 3.5mm connection to be that tight, so if I wasn't careful I could pull them out if my arm got caught in the wires. If you have corded earbuds, it would be worth constructing some kind of ghetto duct-taped device to hold the cables out of the way. The controllers look big, bulky and primitive. The cones at the end are huge and flex a bit when pressed. From all the scratches on them, I suspect they were well acquainted with their previous owner's walls. But they seem pretty robust since everything's still in perfect working condition. I have rather large hands and my fingers all comfortably settle on the buttons they're supposed to. Better than they do on the Valve controller actually. The buttons all have a satisfying feel to them, with the exception of this middle one, which is mushy and I struggled to tell when it was pressed. It's situated further down the controller than on the Index, so pressing this while holding down the trigger cramped up my thumb. An example of this combination in game would be with grenades, where you have to hold them and press the button to activate them at the same time. The thumbstick's surface feels cheap on the Lenovo, but in use they feel practically identical. The trigger button is smaller than the one on the Valve Index, and doesn't have that final fully pressed in click. But it squeaks less and feels similar in general use until it's fully pressed. And this middle finger button feels good to use, but is only used in Half-Life Alyx to drop a magazine out of your weapon. And last, the thumb circle bit clicks when pressed, unlike the Valve Index one, which is touch only. This button opens up the weapon menu in Half-Life Alyx, and I found it a bit more reliable in use on the Lenovo. Valve's knuckle controllers deserve credit for trying to make in-game actions feel more natural and for not needing to be continually gripped, but there are definitely occasions when I prefer the more reliable, audible clicks of the more traditional controller type. My experience with the game was good with these controllers. The controls were vastly different from the knuckles, but they made sense and felt intuitive. Valve has taken the time to optimise Half-Life Alyx for all major controller types, so this isn't surprising. As for the rest of VR titles, I honestly think these Windows controllers will be better supported than the knuckle ones, since they're so similar in design to the Oculus controllers, which I suspect most games are designed for. Back to Half-Life Alyx, there are certain actions in game where the shape of these controllers will cause problems. If you cock a gun like so, your two controllers will collide unless you change how you'd normally perform that action. There is a button to perform this automatically. The other situation where they collided was here, where you're pressing a button on something that you're holding in the other hand. This happens because these cones are massive. It's less of a problem with the Rift controllers since they're more compact, and of course the Valve knuckles are designed in a way where they rarely collide at all. Like I said, these controllers seem robust enough to withstand the odd collision in situations such as this one, which is just as well. Something worth mentioning is the batteries. These controllers use two AA batteries each, double what the Rift requires and far more hassle than the Valve Index's USB charged controllers. I don't know how long a set of fully charged batteries will last, but I will say those LEDs sure glow bright. It's a given that you should have at least 8 rechargeable batteries, so that you can have 4 on charge at all times if you want to be able to use this device unhindered. Unfortunately, this being a Windows mixed reality device, it has Windows software that tries to take control every time you put the headset on. I have met the Cortana mascot in VR, and it is not a pretty sight. I get the feeling that VR isn't as important to Microsoft as it is to Oculus or Valve, so while their software works, it isn't as polished or as nice to use. It all feels a bit loud and intrusive. Still, it works with Steam VR, and that's the important thing. This can be done by downloading the Windows Mixed Reality for Steam VR software on Steam. It feels a bit like needing Uplay and Steam to play a game, only worse than that because you need to broker a peace agreement between the two before they'll cooperate with each other. Just make sure you have a working Windows button on your keyboard, because it's the only way you can take control back from it once their software starts up. Shout out to the headset for not requiring an extra power socket like the Valve Index does. Somehow this entire thing is USB powered, with the other cable plugging into an HDMI port. Yes, HDMI. But don't worry, it's a magical HDMI that's capable of high resolutions and refresh rates. And being HDMI, it'll be better compatible with laptops and such than the Valve Index's DisplayPort will be. The initial setup screen worked great, but sadly once it's done it wants you to be doing everything in VR at all times, even when the thing you're trying to do is getting the controllers to be recognised again. I could do without the 3D world it forces you into, it's just irrelevant because all I really need is Steam VR. The room setup was quite silly to do. I had to hold the headset so that it was facing the monitor while tracing the shape of the room, which resulted in some silly manoeuvres. But once I had it set up, it worked for the rest of the evening, even after having switched between it and the Valve Index several times. The same couldn't be said about the controllers though. These are controlled by a Bluetooth USB dongle you can plug into your PC, but to sync them up you need to remove the battery cover and press this fiddly little button down. It's not that obvious or reliable. The room boundary was not as good as the Steam VR one either. It shows a square on the floor to outline your playable area, and when you get close enough to the edges it generates a ripple pattern to warn you. This managed to be the unlikely and unlikable combination of less visible, yet more distracting. IPD, the thing that measures the distance between your eyes, is done using software. I don't care how clever this is, I automatically consider this to be inferior to the Valve Index's proper hardware IPD adjustment, which physically adjusts how far apart the eye holes are. I never really thought about what software IPD adjustment would do exactly, but it just alters the point where the focus of your eyes converge. After a second of adjustment, I could use any setting with my eyes. But if your eyes are too close together or too far apart to line up with the eye holes, then you're going to have to go seriously cross-eyed or 1,000-yard stare to see what's going on, which is not ideal. I'm not exactly sure how many people fall into this category, but you might struggle a bit if you look like a Bond villain. I ran into a few bugs which I'll mention the solutions to here, because those of you who haven't yet bought a headset might want to know what to expect, and those of you who have one will be thankful for the solutions. This device does not like NVIDIA DSR, that is, super resolutions above what your monitor can display, so disable that before you plug the headset in. The most annoying problem I found was that when I hadn't had the headset plugged in for a while, applications wouldn't detect the controllers until I went to Windows settings, Bluetooth and other devices, add Bluetooth, mice and keyboards, then to remove the controllers and to add them again. With practice I got this process down to about a minute. And last, before you try to play any VR games on Steam, get your headset and controllers working in the Windows Mixed Reality homepage first, and then load Windows Mixed Reality for Steam VR, and then the game that you want to play. In that order. These 3 issues perfectly summarise the price you pay for a cheap VR headset. Although they're easy to get around once you know what you're doing, there's still extra steps that I don't have to go through with the Valve Index. I get fed up with people complaining that Half-Life Alyx costs $1,000 to play. Obviously with that they're dismissing any VR device other than the Valve Index. But I'm never sure if they're simply ignorant, if they're afraid of investing in a subpar experience, or if they're aware that their argument is weak so are using a large number to convince bystanders that they've got a valid point. Whatever the reason, they're wrong, and they should be happy about that. At £400 you have the Rift S, which is a good all-round device with excellent software, and down the bottom of the price range are devices such as these. Any headset you buy at the moment will come with compromises. The Valve Index comes with fewer than most, while the Windows Mixed Reality ones come with more. But the important thing is, they still land above the mark required to play and to enjoy today's VR games. And that's really what I mean when I say it's 90% of the immersion of the Valve Index. It's 3D, it's responsive and it's interactive. That's the magical VR formula right there. The Lenovo Explorer is 75% the visual experience of the Valve Index, and 50% of the comfort for 25% of the price. Fortunately, with a bit of homemade ingenuity, you can probably pump those comfort figures up considerably. It's the 75% visual experience that you're stuck with. Only you will know if you're happy with that. Actually, I'm in a better position than you are since I own both devices. I hope I find some way of adjusting the colour balance using software. That would be nice. But even as it is, the situation the Lenovo finds itself in with its colour vibrancy is similar to where the Valve Index stands with its black levels. If you directly compare it to a high quality monitor, it falls short, but put the headset on and you have nothing else to compare it to, and you soon accept it as reality. Plus, on a technical level, it offers a similar resolution at a good refresh rate. And the field of view is smaller than on the Valve Index, but not to the extent that I put the headset on and think, ugh. My only worry is that, even if my judgment of its visual quality is right, if you opt for a Windows mixed reality device, you may be left asking yourself, what if? Every time you see a beautiful view, you will wonder what it will look like with more vivid colours. And every time you wrestle with the fiddly software, you look over at Steam or Oculus and think, what if? Still, if the choice is between this and not experiencing VR, a Windows mixed reality device definitely wins. Just be sure to look up reviews of the headsets that are available to you. They all have to meet a minimum requirement, but some go further than others, and I can only speak for the Lenovo, which happens to be the first one I bid on and got. I've sung its praises, but here's the real question. Knowing what this headset's like, would I have gotten it instead of the Valve Index? Well, I would have bought one of these a few years sooner, that's for sure. And once I had it, it would have been much more difficult to justify buying the Valve Index, since the feature set is so similar, bar a few bells and whistles. I think ultimately I wouldn't have gotten the Valve Index due to how little time I actually spend in VR. If there was enough content for it out there to warrant 20 plus hours a week, then the Valve Index would probably be worth it for the extra comfort. But at the moment, when a VR game worth playing only comes out every few months, I still think a Windows mixed reality device is the easier option to justify. I'm not saying that the Valve Index was a wasted purchase, because I am still treating it as an investment, as something that will pay for itself over the next few years, hopefully as more VR titles are released. And since I have one, I'll be using it to experience those new titles, and I'll do my best to appreciate the premium quality. I feel a bit sorry for Windows mixed reality devices. They've been neglected by Microsoft and are overlooked by most gamers who immediately dismiss them in favour of a premium Rift S or a top-of-the-line Valve Index, even if they can't afford them. From my testing, the Lenovo Explorer is a great little device that, if my Valve Index was to die on me, I would happily use as a backup device. In fact, that sounds kind of mean. I've been happy using it to play Half-Life Alyx with, even when the Valve Index has been working. The game still works as intended. Don't expect the same premium level of build quality, or the same intuitive software. But if you're prepared to put up with a few rough edges and MacGyver-esque alterations, this kind of headset will let you into the world of VR gaming for less money than you might have anticipated. Also, if you want an above average Windows mixed reality headset, then consider the Samsung Odyssey Plus. It's better than the other Windows headsets in several ways, closer in specs to the premium Oculus Rift S. Just a thought, if you can find one for a decent price.